I realized the verdict was already decided when my own lawyer stopped making eye contact. The bailiff had just told us to rise. My knees locked. The courtroom sounded too quiet, like someone had sucked the air out of it. And in that silence, I understood something irreversible had already happened. Whatever story I thought I was telling about my life, this jury was about to replace it with one word. Guilty. I was 32 years old, on trial for killing my business partner. And if this went the wrong way, I would leave the courthouse in handcuffs and come back to the world in my 60s. The worst part wasn't the time. It was knowing that the truth, what actually happened, had already been bent into something unrecognizable, and I helped bend it. 2 years earlier, I was the kind of person nobody remembers. Junior partner at a regional logistics firm, no enemies, no criminal record. Engaged, boring, careful. The kind of guy judges look at and assume he's harmless. That assumption would become the most dangerous thing in the room. My partner Evan was the opposite. Loud, charismatic, always one step ahead, or so it seemed. He brought in clients. I handled operations. We were supposed to balance each other out. Instead, he used me, as in silencing someone clean, to stand between him and the mess. I didn't know that at first. Or maybe I didn't want to. The night Evan died, I was the last person to see him alive. The prosecution would say that fact like it was a punchline. They'd repeat it until it stuck. But context matters. That night, Evan called me after midnight. He sounded wrong, panicked, breathless, said we needed to talk about the books, said there was a problem and it couldn't wait. I drove to the office because that's what I always did. I showed up, cleaned up, made things work. When I walked in, Evan was already bleeding. Not badly, just enough to notice. A cut above his eye. The office looked like a storm had passed through, drawers open, papers everywhere. He told me someone had broken in, told me he scared them off. Then he locked the door. That was the first moment I should have left. Instead, I stayed, and he told me the truth, at least the version he needed me to hear. He'd been laundering money through shell clients, small at first, then bigger. He said someone found out. He said they threatened him. He said if I didn't help him clean this up, we were both finished. I told him I was done. I told him I was calling a lawyer. He laughed. Then he showed me the folder. My name was all over it. Signatures I didn't remember making. Emails I didn't remember sending. Transactions routed through accounts I controlled. It was fake, but it was good fake. Good enough that no one would bother untangling it. That's when the argument turned ugly. I remember yelling. I remember him shoving me. I remember the sound of my head hitting the metal filing cabinet. And then there was a gun on the desk. Evan's gun. He always said it was for protection. I don't remember picking it up. I remember the sound. I remember Evan looking surprised, like this wasn't how the story was supposed to go. By the time I realized what I was holding, he was already on the floor. That's how the police found me, sitting in a chair, hands shaking, the gun on the desk between us. I didn't run. I didn't hide anything. I told them the truth. What I thought was the truth right up until the point where it stopped protecting me. The first charge was manslaughter. Then it became murder. That didn't happen because of new evidence. It happened because of narrative. The prosecution didn't need to prove I planned it. They just needed to make the jury believe I could have. That I snapped. That I wanted Evan out of the way. That I stood to gain. And once they framed it that way, everything fit. They found financial irregularities and said I was the mastermind. They said Evan was preparing to expose me. They said the break-in was staged. They said the fight was a pretext. They played my police interview on a loop, the parts where my voice shook, where I contradicted myself, where I said I don't remember too many times. They called it consciousness of guilt. My lawyer called it trauma. The jury called it suspicious. Every 15 minutes in that courtroom felt like another small piece of my life being reinterpreted by strangers who had never met me. Text messages read out of context. Emails projected onto a screen like they were confessions. My calm demeanor one moment, my emotional collapse the next, both used against me, too cold, too emotional, too quiet. I started to realize this wasn't about what happened in that office. It was about who the jury wanted to believe existed. And Evan, dead, got to be whoever they needed him to be. The turning point didn't come with a dramatic witness or a surprise video. It came with a spreadsheet. A junior forensic accountant, young, nervous, testified about cash flow anomalies. Routine stuff. My lawyer asked him one more question than expected, and the kid hesitated. Then he admitted something small. One set of timestamps didn't align with Evan's version of events, just a few minutes off. But those minutes mattered, because they placed Evan accessing the system after he claimed the break-in happened. After he said, I arrived. After he said everything was already ruined. It suggested something else had gone wrong, something Evan hadn't planned for. That crack widened when my lawyer pushed harder. Suddenly, the prosecution's clean timeline started to wobble, not collapse just enough to introduce doubt. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't drowning alone. But doubt isn't innocence. And the jury still had a dead man and a gun with my fingerprints. The pressure came back fast. In closing arguments, the prosecutor leaned into certainty. He called Evan flawed but honest. He called me calculated. He said accidents don't look like this. He said fear doesn't explain motive. When my lawyer stood up, he didn't argue I was perfect. He argued I was human. He argued that fear, manipulation, and a single irreversible second can coexist without intention. He ended with one sentence I'll never forget. Ask yourselves not whether the defendant could have done this, but whether the state proved he meant to. Then it was out of our hands. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. 9 hours of sitting in a holding room, staring at beige walls, replaying the sound of a gunshot I still hear in my sleep. 9 hours of imagining two futures diverging based on 12 people's interpretations of my worst night. When they finally called us back in, I felt hollow, like whatever happened next wouldn't quite reach me. The foreperson stood. Her hands shook. Not guilty of murder, guilty of voluntary manslaughter. I didn't react. Not because I didn't care, but because my body couldn't decide whether it was relief or grief. I was going to prison, but I wasn't disappearing forever. 10 years with parole eligibility at 6. As they led me away, I looked at Evan's family. They didn't look at me. I don't blame them. I've been inside for 3 years now. I've had time to think about truth and how fragile it is once it enters a courtroom. How stories harden. How guilt and innocence aren't opposites so much as competing narratives with consequences. I did kill a man. I didn't plan to. Both things are true. The record says the case is closed. The transcripts are filed. The verdict is final. But every night, when the lights go out, I replay the moment before the sound, when leaving was still an option, and wonder how many lives hinge on the seconds we don't think will matter. There are many more stories like this on my page, so what are you waiting for? Go subscribe.